if I'm looking to pivot my business, what do I do with all the content if my message is changing? And it really got me thinking. This is a question that we run into almost every time we do a rebrand for an established client. So I'm kind of curious, Gretchen, can you walk through what are the first, second, third step that you would do with a client going through this process?
Yeah, so step one, well, we do some brand strategy first to figure out where do you want to go first. So we got to define what's the end game.
Yeah.
And once we know what the end game is, then we go back and we do what's called a content inventory with the client. And that's just like a roundup of everything they have. And remarkably, even when we go through that process, we still find, 2-3 weeks later, oh, I forgot I had. And then,
there's always more. You've always got more.
Always something. So, but we try to get as much as we can out of the gate. And when we do that, then we have an idea of, number one, the volume that is there. And then we can kind of start to corral and look for categories and buckets and figure things out. Because a lot of times these clients, they've been in business for a long time.
Yes.
And they have amassed a ton of information. Some of it's outdated. Some of it is not even being used anymore. It could be old lead magnets, things like that. And we start to step number 2 is culling all that information and just saying, okay, what do we need and what do we don't need? And then,
well, and so when you're doing that, when you're going through a content inventory and you're culling the information, does that mean that you should actually delete information that you've created? Like, we've had a lot of clients ask, do I just delete my whole old blog? What's your recommendation on that?
That's a good question. If the information is so outdated that you're never going to use again, I obviously just delete it. Sometimes it's just mangled or it's part of another plugin or something. There's just all kinds of reasons why some stuff just needs to be deleted. But if it's something where you're like, I kind of like what I wrote, but it really needs to be refreshed, but I don't want it out there right now. In those cases, I would say, yeah, save it. You can preserve it in a lot of different ways, but I would say save that and then, stick it in your back pocket. And when you have a little bit more time after you've rebranded and refreshed and gotten your new direction going, then go back and see how you can make that fit into the new direction.
Well, and I would also say you've probably built like good backlinks or, good traffic to certain pages. So it's incredibly important to do that content inventory that Gretchen mentioned, because you definitely want to make sure you're not removing content that is high traffic content for you.
Yeah, always check that with like Google. Google Analytics is a typical tool that people are using to track that. So, or what if there's something different, that's fine. But always check and see what kind of traffic are you getting to that. Because if it's outdated, but you're getting traffic to it.
Yeah.
Then you want to look at, okay, can I just modify this content so it's more relevant? It makes more sense. Because if it's outdated content, number one, you're either giving them bad advice or you're giving them content. Then when they get there, they're going to be like, ugh, this isn't really what I wanted. Yeah. And they're going to bounce. And we don't want that. So look at those metrics, make sure that traffic's not bouncing, figure out what the right move is, and then update that content accordingly. If that content happens to be something where it's like, that's just cut it, kill it, then we need to set a redirect, because we don't want that page to just disappear and then Google think you're just willy-nilly cutting stuff out of your website, because you definitely don't want to do that.
Well, and this is your thought leadership. So it really needs to be treated with respect. So I would highly recommend, if you're going through this process, it is not you on a whim randomly deleting things. Like there is a real process that you should go through for this. And so if a client is starting by, or a thought leader is starting by going through and doing a content inventory, basically assessing all the content on their site, deciding what's still relevant, what could we maybe think about getting rid of, are there ways for them to preserve content that they may want to get rid of?
Oh yeah. Data is data. It's just text, or bytes but it's digital data. So, you can export that and archive it away. You could copy paste it into Google Docs. There's all kinds of ways to preserve it. If it's like a WordPress site or something like that, just save it as draft so it's still in the back end. But I mean, for me personally, what I would do is I would archive that somewhere outside of your website or your database, because your website, especially if you've been in business for a long, long time, is going to be pretty bloated and big. And one of the things we do with the rebrand, or when we're working with a client, even just refreshing a site, is going back through and saying, okay, you got a lot of stuff back here. It's just like if you over time your house fills up with things that you got on vacations and just life, and every once in a while you got to do that spring cleaning and wipe, and that's pretty much what every website needs, although most people don't do it as often as they should.
Well, and I think another thing to consider, if okay, you're ready to make a pivot, you're thinking about maybe directing your content in a different way, or maybe science has changed around something that you've taught and that needs to pivot. But if it's content that you think, hey, this might still be relevant, but how is it going to connect to my new brand direction? That's really the fun and the creativity of it. So then that next step is really thinking about, well, what is your new process going to be like? Are there new content categories that you want to align to? Sometimes it's just a matter of rethinking, what are the buckets that I want to teach people around? So for us, we help our clients get clear, get noticed, and get paid. So get clear as strategy, get noticed as brand visuals and development, get paid as e-commerce and ongoing funnels. So when we think about those content categories for ourselves, now we can recategorize blogs. Maybe we can take something that we used to speak about it in one way, but oh wait, it actually still really fits in this category. So in some instances, it's keeping the same content, but putting a new label on it and thinking about it from a slightly new angle. And so it doesn't mean that you have to wipe out your whole history of thought leadership. We do not want to do that. There's brand equity in that. So you've really got to think through the steps and the nuances of it. Is there anything else that you would recommend that they do if they're finding themselves facing a content shift like this?
Basically, I'm just going to echo what you just said. Don't wipe it out just because you think it's irrelevant. Again, look at the traffic. Make sure that you're not, basically harming yourself in your traffic by getting rid of something that might have been pulling.
There's so many parts of a rebrand that are involved. How do I even know if I'm ready for a rebrand? My content is just one little sliver of it. Well, guess what? We have a free quiz for you. If you go to leftrightlabs.com/quiz, you're going to be able to take a quiz that helps you figure out, where are you in your rebrand process? Like, it will help you assess each area of a rebrand and how healthy you are in that place and how strong your brand is. So we highly recommend that you do that. Please make sure that you take a second. If this has helped you out today, go ahead, like and subscribe. Share this with somebody else who is going through a pivot in their own business, and reach out and tell us what you want to learn more about next.